Things were going to get hairy as we approached the main building. There was no getting around it. Gicanto did a good job of getting us in, however. He said he remembered his way, sort of, and the rest he knew from studying satellite photos and reading secret documents. The UFO was housed in a massive warehouse at the north end of the base. Unfortunately, it would also be the most heavily guarded part of the base. We drove without drawing any unwanted attention. We were in a military vehicle and it was dark outside, so no one could see into the car. We pulled into a parking lot, maybe a quarter of a mile from the warehouse, and got out. I had Gicanto and Alice walk close to me, each of them draping an arm around my shoulders as I activated my stealth field. It was a little awkward, but we simply walked up to the main base, slid past the barrier at the checkpoint, and approached the warehouse. We were going to walk into one of the most secure locations in the country, and no one would know. Not at all surprisingly, the door was locked and required a keypad entrance. Smelly used the suit to scan the keypad and project a probable entry code. I punched it in, and the door clicked and slid open. It was that easy. We stepped into the building. Inside was not a huge warehouse, but a corridor. I figured there were numerous rooms and projects in here, but there had to be some kind of UFO hangar somewhere. I looked at Gicanto, but he shook his head.
I don't know. I've never seen this part of the building before. We'll just have to wander around until we find something. Find something I recognize, or find some clue of where we should go.
We made our way forward in the dim light, avoiding obstacles and sticking close together to remain invisible. The corridor was long and industrial-looking, with concrete floors, cinder-block walls, and metal doors. The lights were dim, but it seemed like the hallway went on almost forever, and there was no UFO this way sign anywhere. The darkness was also the reason I tripped. It would have been nice if I hadn't been to blame, but it was me. I stumbled on a slightly raised step, the kind with the black and yellow stripe to keep idiots like me from tripping, and went lurching forward. I stayed stealthed, but for just an instant, Gicanto and Alice were visible, which allowed them to be picked up on security cameras or motion detectors or whatever they had. And that was all it took. A jarring klaxon sounded, red lights began flashing. "Way to go, you idiot," Smelly said. Gicanto looked around. Even in the dim light, I could see that his face was drawn.
I think we need to hurry.
"Stay behind me," I told them, unstealthing. It would be harder to protect them if they had no idea where I was. We reached another locked door and I punched in the key code Smelly fed me, but it didn't work.
They must be on lockdown, Gicanto said. You probably need an emergency code to gain access now.
I nodded. I was already moving to Plan B, and Smelly was feeding me instructions. It told me to try and break the door down, and with no time to argue that I couldn't do that, I slammed my shoulder into the door, which flew forward. Our way was clear, except for the 6 soldiers waiting for us, rifles out. And they were firing their guns, which were shooting actual bullets at us. Gicanto and Alice dove for cover. I ran towards the soldiers. The field generated by the suit stopped the bullets in midair. They fell to the floor like a handful of bolts while I ran past the soldiers, one hand out, like I was giving a team high five. I made contact with the first man, dishing out a blast to render him unconscious, and then moved to the next one. It took about 30 seconds, but they all went down. The alarm was still sounding, but at least the gunfire had ended. I let Gicanto and Alice know we were in the clear, and we continued on.
You should have kept one of them conscious, Gicanto said. Maybe he could have told us where to go so we're not wandering around here forever.
It was a good point. I wish that I'd thought of it. When we entered the next room, it was what I had in mind. I went ahead to scout and found 2 soldiers, who were surprised by my bursting through the door, sending it off its hinges. I tased one right away and knocked the weapon out of the hands of the other. "Where's the UFO?" I demanded, lifting him off the floor by his shirt, which wasn't easy given he was easily a foot taller than I was. "I don't know," he cried. "He's lying," Smelly said. "I know you're lying," I said. "Tell me!" I shouted this last part, trying to sound fierce. "2 flights down," he said. "Follow the signs for section C11. Now it speaks the truth." I let him drop. "Come on, guys," I shouted. I then turned back to the soldier to knock him out, and realized in a terrible moment that I'd done things in the wrong order. I should have flooded him with electricity first, because in that one instant where he turned away, He'd taken the hand grenade off his belt and tossed it on the floor in front of Gicanto and Alice. Time seemed to slow down. I felt like I stood there forever, looking at the grenade as it spun lazily on the concrete floor. Gicanto and Alice looked up, horrified as realization washed over them. The soldier was already fleeing, pin in his hand, which meant the grenade was going to explode, and nothing could change that. Smelly immediately sent a flash of images to my mind. It was a jumble, but I understood them. I didn't have time to get the soldier, retrieve the pen from his hand, and neutralize the grenade. My only choice was to run. Except I wasn't about to let Gicanto and Alice die because they tried to help me. There was only one other choice, and I took it. I threw myself on top of the grenade. This sounds much braver than it felt at the time. I didn't feel brave, I just wanted to protect my friends. I also believed, or hoped, that the suit would keep me from getting killed. I distantly heard Smelly objecting, but by the time I'd leapt forward, it was too late for him to do anything about it. Smelly might have been able to manipulate my body, but he couldn't do much against the laws of gravity. I landed hard, feeling the grenade like a lump under my stomach. Then there was a bright light, and heat washed over me, and I had a nasty feeling of my back hitting the floor. Except that I was looking down at the floor, and I figured I'd just been smacked against the ceiling, which meant the floor was below me, and I was now rushing towards it. When I slammed into it, the experience was unpleasant. I picked myself up slowly. My pants and shirt were in tatters like I was a skinny kid version of the Hulk. The suit underneath was torn as well, completely shredded in some places. I had no doubt that it had been destroyed. There was no sign of blood, missing limbs, or mangled organs, so that went in the plus column. Alice and Gicanto were looking at me, stunned, unable to believe what I'd just done. But there was no time to waste marveling. My suit was ruined, and now I had no way to protect us from the soldiers.
"You're even more of an idiot than I dared believe," Smelly said sadly. "You broke my suit."
I had to do something, I said, feeling kind of whiny. I'd let Smelly berate me more later. Time to move, I said, as though I knew what I was doing. I didn't, but we were now inside a government base, housing the greatest secret in the world. I'd set off alarms, taken down soldiers, and caused a whole lot of super-secret military property damage. The one thing we had that was going to keep us safe was gone. I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured we had to find that ship fast and get out of here, or we were all in big trouble. I followed a staircase down, and then entered another floor full of corridors. We followed the signs to C11, and somehow, miraculously, we encountered no resistance. When we rounded the corner, we came to a key code door. Not waiting for me to ask, Smelly projected a series of lights onto the door, and I punched them in the order it showed me. The door opened, and we went through. On the other side was a massive chamber. It seemed as big as a football stadium. There were forklifts and golf carts and metal shelves piled high with machines whose purpose I couldn't even guess at. There were shelves filled with boxes containing alien artifacts, or the Lost Ark, or who knows what else. And there, in the center, was what I had hoped most to find, a phatic cruiser. The black saucer sat in the center of the cavernous room, somehow still menacing despite looking forlorn and beached. For an instant, my heart leaped with joy. Then, that joy vanished as I realized what I was looking at. Not a working phatic cruiser, but the remains of one. Pieces were missing. The hull was full of holes. Wires and fibers and strands of metal hung loose from entire sections. People had been working on it, tinkering with, and straight up dissecting the vessel for decades. The phatic ship sat crooked, broken, and lifeless. It wasn't going to take me anywhere. I hardly had time to let despair wash over me before I heard the sound of boots tramping the floor behind me. We were trapped. This had been my one shot at escaping, and it had come to nothing. Now I was caught, with nowhere to run. I'd led myself, the people who trusted me, to ruin. I held up my hands, and Alice did the same. After a moment, Gicanto held up his arm. I turned to face whoever was coming for me. Would they be fads, or would they be government operatives in their service? Instead, I saw a familiar face, haggard, stern, and scarred. a patch covering the right eye.
"Hello, Mr. Reynolds,"
He said Colonel Richard Rage.
"We've been looking for you."
Behind him were at least 10 soldiers, their short automatic weapons raised at us. Colonel Rage waved them down.
"No more trouble from you, all right?"
Yeah, I said. You don't need the guns.
"You made quite a mess,"
The colonel said. I shook my head. All that talk you gave me about wanting to protect America, I said to him. And now what, you're going to turn me over to the enemy?
"The enemy?"
He barked.
"I'm not handing you over to any enemy, son. That's not how we do things on my watch." "Coming through,"
said a voice I thought I'd never hear again.
"Let him see I'm here."
From behind the line of soldiers came a being the likes of which had never been seen on Earth before. He was barely 5 feet tall, but broad shoulders, built like a predator. His boar-like snout was adorned with sharp tusks, and his open mouth revealed gleaming white teeth, sharp as needles. Thick, ropey hair hung from his head, and he regarded us with unreadable black eyes. It was my old friend, Urch.